Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Meme Team podcast. I'm Sonia Bashez, and this is a podcast where we dissect the marketing strategies creating breakout cultural moments. This week, I'm welcoming Trishla Oswal from Adweek. She's the AI and tech reporter over there. Welcome, Trishla.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Definitely excited for our chat today. So we're going to go through a couple of updates from last week and then, get into the main podcast. So we wanted to follow up because Ring and Amazon have announced that they are pulling the plug on their Flock safety integration after the Super Bowl ad flopped pretty badly last week. It triggered a social media firestorm about surveillance and ICE access and like what it means for them to be able to see things when you haven't approve that, or you have to opt out if you don't want them to do that, even though the partnership never went live. But I think it goes to show that these are things that companies need to be paying attention to. What is happening in the culture and what people are talking about that your brand can be associated with, how you're going to like promote your product in a way that doesn't give people creepy and scary vibes about the things that they're already afraid of. And I think Ring has kind of been like towing that line a little, too closely. And this kind of pushed them over the edge. And I think that image that really stuck out to people was the one with like the blue like circles expanding outwards of like what people could see, and then obviously the number about only finding 365 dogs and like what that trade-off means for you as a user. So Trishla, I know that you saw this because you were covering the Super Bowl commercials, but would love to know your thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting because Amazon is kind of reading the room here, right?
Mhm.
Although they did not point to the Super Bowl ad backlash for ending the deal. But what it tells us about people is that I think they're hyper vigilant and hypersensitive to anything when it comes to surveillance. I could totally understand why people find this invasive. I think recently you might have seen the friend necklace that was doing the rounds
Mhm.
in New York City. And I think
Yeah.
they also ran that campaign maybe in LA, maybe in Paris. It's funny because it's like everywhere, most of the people had the same reaction. This is surveillance capitalism or what have you. Um, and people, I think, are a lot more aware of how their data is being used. And especially when it involves law enforcement, it can get uncomfortable really fast.
Mhm,
Um,
mhm.
so I guess this feels like a preemptive move, not because the product doesn't work, but because the perception of it is kind of like becoming risky. And I guess in today's economy, perception is everything. You can have the best tech,
Yes.
but if it feels creepy, it's going to be a brand problem. And I think Amazon perhaps gauge that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this reminds me of Facebook announcing that their glasses are going to start, doing the recording and then helping give you information for people, right? And I saw, kind of split views, right? There were some people in tech that are like, oh my God, this would be so great. Like, there's a lot of people that come up to me and I want to know who they are. And this would be a great way for me to pretend that I do know. And then you had, similar reactions to this. It was like Google Glass, right, where it's like if someone starts like recording me, I'm going to punch them in the face, right? So it really does seem as if there's this view of like people and like privacy, like they're thinking about it a lot more. They're considering like what it means to be filmed or to be, you know in somebody else's view, right?
Mhm.
And this came on the legs of them saying that they're putting it in right now because there's so many other things happening that they think it's going to go under the radar, and it kind of has, right? Because not many people have heard about it, but we'll see what happens if it does go forward, right? But I do think that companies, particularly companies that do deal with like surveillance and like privacy issues, start thinking about that, right? I mean, we're also seeing the craziness that's happening with like Discord having to do age verification and people questioning like whether it's necessary to be uploading your ID and other biometric details in order to be on a chat platform, right?
Mhm.
Whereas like the company is saying, "Oh, we're doing this because, what's happening with children and with teenagers." But the way that they're kind of putting it in is making people feel as if you want all our information because of your association with Peter Thiel's, company, so that you have all our information. And then, they also announced yesterday that the government has been sending letters to tech companies to get information from us, right? Famously, right now, like Anthropic has been pushing back. And, we have Secretary of War Pete Hegseth saying that. They're going to put them on like the, do not use list, basically.
Mhm.
So they're not going to use it. And it also means that other people that have government um, contracts can't use them either. And that's because they're fighting, back, which, makes me question, well, so none of the other companies are fighting back. All the other companies are just giving them our information. So there's a lot going on in this space right now. But it is something that these companies have to like, be aware of like the cultural moment and like where they fit, because everyone's going to be paying attention to their relationships with other companies like this, and then with the government, and what they do to push back or not on all the information and like privacy details that they get from their users.
Yeah. So I did see, a lot of people, especially in social media platforms, kind of applauding Anthropic for taking a solid stance on this. I
Hmm.
mean, if you just look at the way privacy and privacy laws have evolved in this country, I mean, and it's kind of like, as a tech company, you're gonna flirt with the boundaries as much as you can.
Hmm.
Let's see how much we can like gather and get data and do what you
Hmm.
have to do, unless until like I guess the regulators or the lawmakers are like, okay, I think we're gonna draw a line here because this is clearly deceptive. But by then,
Hmm.
you've seen historically how that's a little too late.
Yeah, well, we'll see what kind of, goes on there. But a thing to remember is that this may not be the next administration either, right? And will things change at that point? And will your customer and like user flip from there? And how are you going to be able to come back from
Mhm.
that if you did give in this time around? Okay, and then another one that I kind of want to throw in there, just as a cool like thing that I saw happening, is that Fathom Entertainment dropped their 2026 Big Screen Classics lineup. Basically, they take over movie theaters across the United States and show classics. So there'll be Ben-Hur and then Silence of the Lambs for its 35th anniversary. So I'm really seeing this as like using nostalgia as like a product strategy. It's like, how do we get people back to the movies at a time when they really want to get people to come back, right? I mean, they're coming back for like, the big movies, though we did just see that Wuthering Heights, did pretty well for its opening weekend. But a lot of the other smaller films, indie films, just aren't getting people to come out to the movie theaters. So they're hoping they'll be able to get people to come out for older movies that they want to become, more popular with younger demos that maybe haven't seen them yet, but know that these are movies that they should see. So it'll be interesting to kind of, see what happens here. Did you hear about this?
I did, and you're absolutely right about the fact that they're riding on this wave of nostalgia. That was also a theme that we also saw during the Super Bowl ads. So I'm not surprised that they're doing this, but I think they're tapping into this idea that not everything should be available all the time. So I mean, streaming has made that content super accessible, but also I
Hmm.
guess at some point it does make it feel a little disposable. So when you bring back something back to the theaters, especially for a limited time, it feels more like an event, and it's more like premium in terms of like I need to go and experience this with the people that I enjoy watching movies with.
Hmm.
And people show up differently for events. There's a sense of occasion and community. So I guess yeah, I think it's less about the content itself and more about the experience around it. Um, and I think that's where theaters would still have an edge.
That's like the perfect segue into what I want to talk about this week, which is the marketing that's happening around the drama. So this is the movie starring Zendaya and Robert Pattinson. They're launching what is essentially this immersive wedding campaign that's treating their April 3rd release as a real wedding. On Valentine's Day, they dropped like a functional wedding website for the characters, Emma Harwood and Charlie. You're able to read pretty much all the details of how they came together, FAQs about the dress code, which I thought was like really cool because it's like one of the things that I'm noticing with like movies and like events is that if you get people to dress up in a certain way, like have a, uniform, like we saw with the Barbie movie, dressing all in pink, we saw with the Minions movie, dressing up in like suits, it gets people to think of it as a more of an event. I'll be curious to see if people actually like really dress up. But one of the things that stood out to me was that they have this RSVP function where you can, sign up and have the Google Calendar drop on your own Google Calendar to tell you, hey, this is when the movie's premiering and give you that reminder. They also include Boston travel recs, which are kind of show you a little bit more detail about who the characters each are. And it really showed the voice of like who the characters are going to be, which I thought was like, really fun. This follows the wedding announcement that they did in the Boston Globe. I think what's like really notable here is that the campaign is centering around the characters, kind of like we saw around Marty Supreme, right? Though that one blurred the lines a little bit more because that like, is this Timothy or is this like, Marty Supreme, his character? And I think kind of, where people landed was like, well, he's very much like his character, right? Because like he was going for it. Even the director, Josh Safdie, came out and said, like, I wrote this specifically for Timothy. So I think we're going to start seeing a lot more blurring of like the character and like the actors, which I think actually makes it easier for the actor, right? Because then they can kind of go and do like a lot of more of like the promotional tour as their character and not so much as themselves and have to say like who they are and put themselves out there. I did see recently another marketing thing that like stuck out to me was Ryan Gosling is out kind of promoting Project Hail Mary, and he's about to be on SNL. And so he did like a FaceTime with Mikey Day, and they're kind of like going back and forth for like Palentine's Day. And at first, you can't really tell if it's like a skit or if it's like a real thing. And then it turns out that it is a skit because like Ryan Gosling is like, breaking character throughout. But it's like, starting to like blur the lines. And then I saw that his partner, Ava Mendes, came out and said that like the only partner or the only other of his co-stars that she's been jealous of is Rocky, right?
Mm.
And not like Rachel McAdams from The Notebook or, Michelle Williams from Blue Valentine. I think it's like really showing that like we're starting to see celebrities market movies in a completely different way. And that's kind of like fun and unusual. And that's why it's like working for me because it is different, right? Um, I'm sure we're still gonna get like the normal stuff of like, the Zendaya, method dressing where she's like dressing up like her character. Is it gonna be like wedding attire because she's supposed to be more of a normal person versus like in other movies, she's like, she was like the tennis star, she's in Dune, right? So it's like very closely tied to like her character. So Trishla, have you seen this campaign? What do you think about it?
I have seen this campaign, and I feel like, yeah, it's on brand with, or rather, it's on trend with a lot of the recent movies we have seen come out post the pandemic, where there is a very sort of intentional drive to get people outdoors and be like, come experience this end to end. People feel like they're part of something more premium.
Yeah, A24 is like really carving out a like marketing strategy where it's not just about the movies, but now I'm like, I want to see how A24 is going to market something, right? Marty Supreme, like them dropping that like Zoom call with like Timothy Chalamet and like their marketing team, right? Not knowing what the line was between what was fake in like the Zoom call versus what was real. And so here's the same thing, right? Where it's like they have a fully developed website that you can go and like click around and see like the photos and see, all of this. And then now it's making me think, well, what else are they gonna do? Right. I think I saw someone post yesterday, like I'm expecting like a Vogue wedding shoot. And what's starting to happen is that now all these other companies are incentivized to welcome them and do these partnerships because they're earning more attention themselves, right? Like all the stuff that Timothy Chalamet was doing with like the merch shop and the Statue of Liberty and then the Empire State Building, right? Like it's bringing attention to these like cultural landmarks and was making it very much about New York. And so this one, it's like they had the name of the photographer, they tagged them. And then the photographer on his page had like photos of their engagement shoot, right? So it's like really blurring this line of like what's real, what's not. and then making that be the story that goes about it, right? And then that's what people are talking about. They're talking about the mystique and like the how real it seems, right? So like the Boston Globe announcement, like people were, posting that like, oh my God, look, like this is it's a real announcement in the Boston Globe, and so they're posting about that online. It's getting a lot of earned media because the marketing campaign is so good, and it's that word of mouth just keeps spreading because now people are being detectives, right? They're going out and finding out all the little Easter eggs that was dropping about the characters. And people are then posting about that on social media. So it's creating more of this like buzz loop because people are talking about the Easter eggs. And then, showing kind of like how real the whole thing is. And I think this really worked here because Zendaya and Robert Pattinson are some of the most famous celebrities out there right now. So it's making it more about the movie than it is about them, which is always kind of like the hard part with promoting movies, right? Because, oftentimes you get oversaturated with like the celebrity that like it just becomes about the celebrity. They're both in very famous relationships, and nothing is coming out about that. It's all about the movie, which I think is like the brilliancy of this campaign, and that's all that we're talking about instead of, what happens for other campaigns that, they're on top of.
Yeah. I mean, I guess like also adding to that, we live sort of like in this ever fast, ubiquitous bubble where they're just trends. You hop from one trend to
Mhm.
another. I don't remember the last time that the entire world went crazy about one movie, the cult favorites, Mean Girls and things like that. People would talk
Yeah.
about that time and
Yeah.
again for years together, even today. And it was
Mhm.
never about who the actor was, but more about what the plot was. And, on Wednesdays We Wear Pink is still very much relevant even today. I do suppose like in the sort of noisy environment that we live in are these is A24 and even the brands themselves trying to kind of like stand out, make a noise that lasts beyond just the movie itself, and that's why
Mhm.
all the efforts towards marketing. We've seen that, but in contrast, we've seen this with the shows that take place on Netflix or whatever, like Bridgerton.
Mhm.
People love these shows, and you don't have to like hyper sell it to them like, oh my god, you got to come and watch this because XYZ whatever. No, they're
Mhm.
hooked on from season 1. They're gonna be your loyalist to the end of it. So
Mhm.
I guess like the big theater does have a lot to sort of like compete against.
Yeah, I think a thing here that also stands out that I've talked about before is this idea of world building, right? Where it's like, you mentioned these two like Netflix shows, and those are two very big worlds that they've kind of built out and that people are kind of committed to now because they like the characters, but now it's like they care about the world itself and like how having that kind of, come to life. So that was why I called them out when they did their commercial about like the 10 worlds, where it's like, okay, Netflix is going all in on their worlds and like using that as a way to separate themselves, right? So it's like, what can they do with that? Obviously they don't have a Disneyland the way that Disney has like their world building, right? But Netflix can kind of do that online, and I can see them doing like experiences, going forward with the drama. I think they're trying to make the wedding be the experience, right? It's like dress up and like come. I'll be curious to see what else like they can do. Like, are they going to have catered food at like some of like the big city like theaters in like, New York or LA. Like I can totally see that happening. Or in Boston where this movie is taking place, right? Like something like that where it's like more immersive and it gets people to participate, which will then get more buzz because people are already like in it and are feeling more like attached to it because they've been part of like the whole thing from like the wedding announcement to like this wedding website. Like, what are the next steps of a wedding that they can like, get us involved in because we're already in it and paying attention, to everything. But what we can learn from this is that when, your stars are like overexposed, they're appearing in 3 films together just this year, which is kind of wild. We have to kind of separate them from like the Dune mystique and the Odyssey mystique because like those are like the two big movies that most people are going to go watch just because who they are. Not It's not even about Robert Pattinson and Zendaya, right? It's about like the movies themselves. But this is like one movie that's like a small indie film. But it's like, okay, well, how do we get attention? Well, let's make it not about them. Let's make it about the characters and like make it about the wedding. So the mystery of it is what's getting people to pay more attention to it. And then I think the fact that it is an immersive campaign is really working for them because nobody else has done this, right? I think part of what we're risking of like having these ideas is like you have to be the first to do it for it to like really hit, right? I don't see another movie that's going to be able to like, do this, but maybe there's another type of event that they could glom onto that becomes like the thing that, gets us involved. So I really like that, A24 is like really pushing the line here of like what they're doing. And I think what's starting to happen now is that it's less about the movie itself, but now about A24, right? Like now I'm expectant of any movie that A24 is going to come out with and what their marketing campaign is going to be. And I just want to see what the marketing is going to be. Like what new idea are they going to come out with? Because right now, honestly, they're like the movie studio that's doing it the best. That's like, really putting, a different spin on like how they're promoting their movies. It's not just the same old where you like, do the teaser trailer and do then the trailer. Even right now, like we just saw the drop of like the Mandalorian and Grogu film, and it's like, you're kind of still doing the same old marketing shtick that you're used to, right? Like, do something better, Disney. Like, you have more money, you have more sway, and like A24 is out here kicking your butt because like they're coming up with new and creative ideas. So I think that shows like a lot of like what smaller companies can do compared to the big ones because you are able to be more creative and it necessitates you coming up with new ideas, right? Another example of this is that we're seeing with Game of Thrones, a Night of the Seven Kingdoms, where it was just shown yesterday that they have about 25% of the budget of both Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, right? And so like what they're doing with it is, they put in the fog and just made it so that people can see less. But the way that they're talking about it is like, well, we wanted you to feel how people on the ground actually feel, right? So there's ways to like make it about the story, and have that like be the story and not just that, oh, well, we only have 25% of the budget and use as an excuse to not do things as great as you could do them, right? So that's, something to think about. Like, what are creative ways that you as a company can like do things, even with less of a budget, with like 25% of the budget of like the big guys, and do something that's interesting for you and for like your consumer, because that's what matters, like your consumer, and then get them talking about it to the rest of the people.
Yeah, I mean, that's very well put. I don't think I have much to add to that. So,
Awesome. We can just move on to your topic.
okay, so Frida Baby marketing. So, Frida Baby, known for its sort of like irreverent, boundary pushing approach to parenting products, kind of faces backlash after it sort of put out marketing materials that paired baby products or infant products with a sexual innuendo. And I think examples included captions like, quote unquote, this is the closest your husband's gonna get to a threesome, using a rectal thermometer, and quote unquote, how about a quickie, on a packaging uh, material. While the tone may have been intended as humor for stressed parents, I think some people online especially found the juxtaposition of sexual language with baby products off-putting, and I think it also sort of like sparked a lot of people calling for boycotts across parenting platforms. The way sort of I kind of like look at it is that Frida has built its brand by being honest about parenting experiences, postpartum recovery, bodily fluids, and things that feel real but perhaps are under discussed. And I guess this campaign seems to shift that tone into a sexual humor tied directly to infant products, which, I mean, kind of obvious for some audiences, it's going to collapse the two contexts that don't naturally sit together. It seems like the earlier Frida campaigns resonated because they felt sort of empathetic and grounded in real experiences. But I guess this execution reads to some as more provocative than relatable. The difference is, kind of like subtle, but audiences tend to respond. Um differently when something is designed to feel shocking rather than reflecting in reality. But I think there's also an argument that is to be made that this kind of campaign fits into a broader trend that we're seeing these days of just rage baiting. And I don't know how much
Mhm.
of that is sort of driven, is like the driven cause for Frida to go this way, where strong reactions drive visibility. So whether intentional or not, it can come across as it's optimized for attention in an environment where outrage often travels further than nuance, I suppose. Um, and I guess it's also worth noting that parenting is a high trust category. So humor that might work in other verticals doesn't always translate the same way when it involves babies, which kind of narrows the room for experimentation. And lastly, I would say is, come on, Frida, you're mixing two extremely disparate, and both of them are either end of the spectrum, into one sort of campaigning material at a time where the entire world, if not the US alone, is looking at a certain someone and certain files. I just have to say it.
No, so my biggest thing here is that it's not a fresh campaign. It's just like old ones, and
Resurfaced.
people are like
Yeah.
finally, yeah, just like noticing. I think this is one of those things that is another one of those like you got to read the room. And right now, the Epstein files and like, pedophilia is like in people's minds right now a lot more than it was when they first launched these campaigns. So people are just like thinking about that more. So if anything is coming across as like sexual humor with children, it's just not going to sit well with people. It could have worked, like maybe like 4 or 5 years ago when it first like launched and just kind of like kept that brand voice. But now we're just like in different times. And I think that's kind of like what's happening here. Cause I'm sure like they're just like, whoa, how did this happen? Like we've been doing this the whole time. Like people thought it was funny. And now it's like, oh, because the one that stands out to me is because we bought this product before is the one where you like suck the mucus out of your like kid's nose, and it's like, oh, like they make some like sexual innuendo about like sucking, right? And it's like, okay, sure, whatever. But like it was the best product, to do this thing, and all parents kind of like recommended it. So honestly, I didn't like really pay attention too much to the marketing. So a lot of it was like, hey, you get away with these things because your product is so good. But yeah, now that it's like come out, I'm sure they're gonna like come out with like a, some sort of like apology. I hope they do make it, a little bit more heartfelt, and empathetic than like some of the other like, Apple Notes apologies that we get from companies. Cause like I think just even being a little bit honest about like, hey, like, this is kind of like what was working for us, back in the day. And then now we just, didn't move quickly enough to kind of update our brands would be enough. I did see that, one of the things that people are very calling out is that it's a lot of men that are like marketing and that are like, in the C-suite, right? If company culture, is telling you that this is kind of like how we speak about our product, then like it's just kind of how you do that, right? Like the way that we see with the social media brands of like Ryanair and like Duolingo, right? It's like we kind of know what their personas are. This kind of felt like this is Frida Baby's persona, right? It just kind of like hit this wall of like a moment that like people are a little bit more sensitive to like, you know, child sexual abuse
Yeah.
notions than they were when they first launched. And then I don't think that this, is not like walk backable, like where it's like
Yeah.
their brand
Yeah.
is totally ruined from now. They kind of just got caught up in the crosshairs of everything that's like happening. And I do think that like, if they kind of like pivot and make the messaging to be about that, do like a quick, rebrand of everything, they'll be able to do that.
I don't think Frida has come on the record to say anything about this yet, have they?
Mm-mm.
Mm.
No, no.
That
Which is interesting
doesn't.
because it's been a week now.
Yeah, that doesn't usually leave a good taste. It leaves a bad
Yeah.
taste in people, among consumers.
Mhm.
And I guess like the lesson learned here is, like you said, Ryanair or Duolingos of the world. It perhaps is very on brand for them to sort of like toe the line and how sort of sarcastic or how funny or what they want to say. But humor that resonates in one part of the brand narrative or one part of the brand category may not translate across every product or moment, especially when babies are involved.
Mhm.
Um, and okay, maybe you were trying to drive more visibility, stand out because of humor, because there was this trend a couple of years ago that every brand wanted to be humorous and stand out and be
Mhm.
sarcastic and funny. But it's a good I guess it's a good lesson to, hey, let's take a step back, see what we're selling, see who our target audience is, see what's happening when we think about a national discourse, and keeping in mind the Epstein files and everything. That should
Mm.
we, okay, the
Yeah.
mistake has been made, but should we sort of like address this,
Yeah.
take down the materials? Why are they still on social media? I don't know. Um, but just to sort of be fair, brands are known for pushing boundaries, and they operate within like implicit expectations that's kind of like shaped by their audience. But I clearly, people here are just not happy with what Frida had put out, and regardless of like the intent, how people again interpret your message ultimately defines its impact.
Yeah, it's that just reminds me of, remember, you may or may not, I'm not sure if you're a parent, but the whole, "Go the fuck to sleep," like, thing where it was like, that was, like, a moment, and I think that this is kind of a part of that moment of, trying to meet this new, like, millennial parent, audience and capture them with different marketing than our parents got, right? And I think now we're moving over more to the millennial cringe, authentic and like empathetic voice, probably because of everything that's happening, politically. But I've been talking about this more in terms of and you mentioned this, where they kind of stuck with like the rage bait marketing that, has
Mhm.
become so popular. And I think we're heading to a moment where it'll be kind of like Monsters Inc., right? Where it's like it used to be, the whole point was like you were scaring people, making them angry. And that was where you're getting your energy. And then moving over more to like the laugh floor where you're bringing joy and like happiness to people, and like nostalgia and empathy, and making them feel something that's not angry and not scary. And I think this kind of is showing that people want more of that from their brands now. That we've moved on from, rage bait and having that be like the main strategy, because now it just makes people angry. I have less room to be angry about a brand when I'm already angry about so much that's happening, in the world and politically, that like now if you're just going to piss me off, like I'm not even going to pay attention to you anymore.
Yeah.
So it's like, let's move to a place that you're making people experience joy. And like this would be such a good thing with like baby products, because parenthood you have that new identity of new joy, new all that like there's so many good feelings that you can like fall into, that the fact that they haven't actually come out and said like, hey, we made a mistake, we're going to move in that direction, is kind of now a bigger ding on the brand than like the actual marketing that they've done. Okay, awesome. Okay, and then the second topic that I want to talk about is the Chase and Whoop partnership. It was basically Chase launching a limited time partnership with Whoop, offering Sapphire cardholders statement credits on annual memberships, for the 359 Whoop Life Plan. So that's like you basically get a free year. And so this is going to be available until May 12th. So this is kind of continuing the shift of like credit card companies becoming more like lifestyle memberships, right? You have Chase and Amex kind of competing against the same audience, and moving it from being a payment tool, like what you're using your credit card for, to an access path towards like dining credits and entertainment perks. And now we have a lot more wellness benefits, right? So this fits in with their existing relationships with Peloton, Lyft, and DoorDash. So a lot of like these, affluent millennial like brands, like, where you identify as like this type of user, right? And I think we're starting to see that, bifurcation of like the Amex users and like the Chase Sapphire users, depending on what types of perks that they want, right? What's notable here is that Whoop isn't actually discounting anything. Chase is just absorbing the full cost to make their card stickier, right? We see every year that the Chase Sapphire membership keeps going up and up and up. And it's like you have Chase, realizing like, oh, well, we need something to get people to stay,
Mhm.
So that's why I see that they're doing a lot more with these like brand partnerships, where it's like, if our target consumer already uses these brands, then like maybe they'll stay here as like a Chase Sapphire user instead of like an Amex user, or, one of the smaller cards that doesn't have as many like rewards, but you don't have to pay as much for, right? At a time when people are starting to think like, hey, what are the things that I should be paying for and that are worth paying for, or, just get rid of because like it's actually not something that I'm using anymore. Is for those that don't know, it's kind of like the Oura Ring or like the Apple Watch. It kind of keeps track of like your health and wellness. It, tells you how much you're working out and like what you're sleeping. So it's going after people that care about fitness and care about the biometrics and the optimizing of, all these things. So those high income, health conscious, data obsessed users that both of them have are seeing that alignment with this brand. There's also a little friction built in where it's like you have to do a manual activation. So it like, filters out, passive deal hunters and really goes after the type of people that actually care about this and want this. One thing I'm kind of been thinking though here is that I'm seeing a lot more people use the Oura Ring than like Whoop bracelets. So it's kind of funny that this feels like almost 2 to 3 years too late. Because I mean, I have a Chase Sapphire. I've moved over to the Oura Ring. And for me, I'm just like, well, the Whoop thing isn't really something to attract me anymore. Plus I then have to go like the people that would know what a Whoop is would probably already have a Whoop. So there's that like, question there. It's like, who are you actually targeting here? Like people to go get a new bracelet? Or is it just the upgrade from like the basic Whoop plan to like the pro plan? So those are a few, things that kind of like, as I was thinking about it, I'm like, oh, this kind of like, doesn't really make sense. Then again, the other thing that I think about is like I'm more on like the early adopter side. So maybe this is more for like the mass consumer base that like, they're trying to attract a little bit more, where it's like the people that have an interest in like keeping track of like their biometric data, but don't really have loyalty to any product. So maybe that's where they'll be bringing in new users. Or is it that they're trying to do it for like their existing audience? So that's always something that I like think about when it comes to, the type of marketing that you're doing is like, who is it for? Are you targeting the right demographic? And this is actually going to work. Did you see this, Trishla?
I did see that, and I think my first thought here was like, what is Whoop? Maybe I'm
Yeah.
not a target audience. Maybe, like you said, they're a couple of years late to the market because yes, I know of like the Aura Ring, I know about like the Apple smartwatch. So for me, this is like, why now? What is
Mm-hmm.
the idea here? Are you trying to revive a brand that I perhaps have never heard of? Um,
Mm-hmm.
but when I did some digging and looked at Sapphire and Whoop like individually. I guess Whoop is very much kind of like uh you could put it into the performance and optimization sort of like club where it's not for like your everyday gym goers. Maybe it's for like the very health conscious people who want to track how many steps they walk each day and the whole spiel. And Chase Sapphire is about again this premium sort of aspirational lifestyle, and likely you pointed out that they've been increasing their fees sort of every year. So maybe when you combine the two, you're basically telling your so-called target audience that, hey, this is the kind of person you want to be, or this is the
Mm-hmm.
person you are. But then again, I'm like, why now? I could have done this with my RR ring. Maybe this is again an attempt on both their ends to form this exclusive club, which we have seen sort of the RR ring users sort of like fall into, or the Apple Watch wearers kind of like get into. And I guess it's less about maybe let's reach more people and more to do with let's reinforce a specific kind of consumer amongst the existing Sapphire users. And people use brands as signals now, so it's almost like shorthand for identity, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But I clearly I don't know if I'm their target audience for this.
But that's my point though. Like people do use brands as like their own identity. So the fact that they're using Whoop, I'm like, maybe Chase isn't as cool as like is trying to make it out to be. Like this seems like, you're kind of glomming on to like an older fading brand that like was hip, 2, 3 years ago and that, is trying to find relevancy now again through like, Chase Sapphire. But then that makes me bring down the Chase Sapphire brand with it, right?
Yeah,
Not that they're both elevating themselves and like trying to get, if they had done it with Oral Ring, I would be like, yes, that makes sense. That's who you want to partner with because the Oral Ring is like the hip, cool brand that people are
yeah,
using now. They've had, a lot of successful campaigns that we've talked about recently. We're seeing a lot more athletes. I mean, how many Olympic athletes have we seen with the oral ring, during these last Olympics, right? So it's become more of a like signifier of like aspirational marketing, which is what these credit card companies are trying to do, right? Is like be aspirational or like depict that lifestyle, right? Even if maybe it's a little bit out of reach for you, you want to be able to know what the things are that like will make people know that you are part of the in group. And I feel like Oura Ring would have filled that a lot better than the Whoop brand. So like I said, we'll kind of see like what happens, but I don't really expect this to be like for either one of the brands, right? For Chase, like to get more, credit card users or to like keep their current, credit card users, or for like Whoop, to get like more people. Because
Yeah. Yeah.
awesome. Okay, so a couple lessons to be learned that if you want to be a premium brand, you have to choose other premium brands to associate with. And that's like the big thing here where it's like when you choose brands that are kind of outside of that premium realm, it brings down your brand with it. And even if you are kind of like discounting the costs, all I'm seeing is that like it's a discount, it's not something that's like elevating, for me to want to be involved with that, right? Um, we're also seeing, with credit card companies in particular, trying to move over into being more of a lifestyle brand. You have to think about what that lifestyle is that you're trying to get people into. Or maybe is it actually worth it for me to keep the Chase Sapphire when the Amex brand has, these other partnerships that matter a little bit more to me?
Hey, so this one, the Kalshi and Polymarket sort of grocery wars caught my attention. So essentially, these prediction market platforms, Polymarket and Kalshi, sort of like staged this competing marketing stunt in New York City by offering free groceries to the public. So I think Kalshi was the first one. Kalshi was the first one to do it. They launched a one-day promotion covering shoppers' bills up to I think um, $50, a set amount essentially, and
Hmm.
obviously like any sort of viral sort of New York store, this also sort of like saw long lines. Polymarket kind of doubled up and escalated with a multi-day pop-up grocery store where visitors could take items for free alongside a 1 million donation to a local food bank. So the campaigns turn into a visible back and forth, positioning both the companies into a highly competitive public facing sort of grocery wars. If you're not in the tech circles, if you're not on Twitter constantly scrolling or like based in Silicon Valley, I
There's
don't
people
think
that do that.
I don't think people here in New York have heard of Kalshi or Poly Market. I was texting
Mhm.
a friend about this and they're like, what is this? And I'm like, okay, I spent a lot of time on Twitter, got it. Um so it's interesting. Here are these prediction markets that are trying to sell relatively complex products. So
Mhm.
these activations kind of like translate that abstraction into something more immediate and tangible, where people may not fully understand the platform, but they understand the value for groceries, free groceries, and they're like, okay, might as well just like show up. I don't think this was just about consumers. But each of these companies is responding to other in real time, kind of turning marketing into a visible rivalry. We've seen this historically with Coke and Pepsi, Anthropic and OpenAI, and now Kalshi and Polymarket. So there's an argument that these companies also sort of like help reframe that category. But if you look at prediction markets, they kind of feel opaque or speculative. So I think positioning themselves through a very sort of uh, community engagement driven generosity sort of tagline can maybe make them feel more accessible. But also, listen, you're trying to invade the New York City market, which where the city itself plays a massive role, if you ask me, because a line around the block is it becomes content, and we've seen so much of that every time we scroll through any sort of like social media post about New York City. Um, but also, where my mind went was the free grocery stores in a city where prices are skyrocketing. That's interesting, especially it's on brand with Zoran Mamdani's New York City, where the whole shindig is about making everything affordable again. So I don't know how much of that tied into both these companies doing the same stunt. Um, but still, it's very calculated. both the companies have been under scrutiny in the last year, where it's around mostly around like regulation or the ethics of betting in real world events. I think we saw that with Polymarket when a trader sort of made hundreds or thousands of dollars off a well-timed bet on the former Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro's political future. So I guess both these companies have been trying to like build that credibility through some of their recent partnerships, but also integrations across finance and media. And I think these kind of high visibility activations could be seen as an extension of that, especially in a world where everything is AI and AI slop. It's like you want to meet people and tell them about your brand through real world interactions. We've seen that with movies as well. And I think this is just them doing a very smart marketing stunt. Yeah.
The way I saw it was that Polymarket had announced it, that they were doing this like multi-day thing, and then Kalshi came and like, oh well, we're doing this like tomorrow. So it does what you're saying about putting them as rivals against each other and making it so it's like you're trying to really do that like Pepsi versus Coke, Anthropic versus like OpenAI battle of like, hey, we're the two like market leaders and we're trying to go up against each other. I did see some of the sentiment being like it's really like icky that companies that are essentially speculative gambling companies are offering free groceries to people, because like what does that mean about like how you're trying to promote your product, like who's the target demographic is, right? Are they people who would be needing like free groceries? Like that's who you're going after, like people who already don't have money. You're trying to get them to like gamble that money. So I did see that. I do think that it does have a lot to do with, Zohran Mamdani's like, election, because one of the things that he talked about was like, how do we have a government run grocery store where people can come and like have groceries that cost less? So it wouldn't surprise me to know that that's kind of where the idea came from. But yeah, it really seemed as if what they're trying to do is get goodwill from the public, because right now they are facing, a lot of possible like regulation and like, bad sentiment because it is speculative, right? Yeah, that Nicolas Maduro one was like, a big thing. But one that just happened, I think yesterday, was that people were able to bet on whether the spaceship that was going to go up was going to, make it or not, right? And people were like, oh, you're making it so people can bet on whether people are going to live. And then their Twitter responded, it's not about whether people are going to live or die. It's about whether the spaceship is going to, make it up. And it's like, okay, but those things are not separate, right? You understand that, right? It seems like you're being obtuse. We can all see what is what this is actually about, where you are betting on like people's lives. So I think that is a thing that like, they are starting to get a little bit more backlash on, where it's like people are starting to like realize like, are these the type of companies that like should be out there that we are promoting, right? We see this all the time now in the conversation with like sports, right? Like I saw this recently because people were saying like, oh wow, did you notice how you don't have the ticker on the bottom of like the Olympics feed, telling you like, oh, the probability going up or down of like who's going to win, who's going to lose, right? Which has now affected, all the other like major sports, right? Basketball, baseball. I got trapped once in like an ESPN channel that like I thought was ESPN, but turns out was like a predictive market ESPN, where like you could be paying attention to what the stats, what the odds are of like who's going to win or lose the game. And it's kind of like, insidious now, where it's kind of across all of our media on like social media. You see like them going like up and down, and you have people placing bets on things that like, maybe they shouldn't be placing bets on. But then also like the stories that we're starting to hear about people losing money and losing their homes and all these things, right? So the fact that they went for like a grocery store, for me, just didn't sit well, because it's like kind of pairing up again, like the ring thing, where it's like, is the message that you're sending showing that like you're not paying attention to the culture or what people are saying about it? But it did get a lot of like social clout, so maybe it was
Yeah.
successful. And it is kind of like leaning into the whole idea of like having experiences and like pop-up stores, right? Like we've seen so many pop-ups just in New York alone, right? We saw the Grand Central Station like Severance like experience. We saw the ramp experience with like the CFO in a box,
Mhm.
Stranger Things had one, J. Crew had one. Like all these companies have had pop-ups in New York. So it's like you're gonna get attention. But I really think that, companies that are gonna go that route need to start, thinking about where they fit in into the cultural narrative and see if that's really the message that they want to put out there.
It almost feels as if they're taking the advantage of the backlash that they get as a method to sort of make up for the lack of the good. I'm not saying that that the platform is nefarious in any means, but kind of like make it up with the goodwill act of free grocery.
Hmm.
Um, and again, it's like my mind goes to just like New York City is not a tech bubble that it's
Right.
not a tech bubble like San Francisco. And maybe in SF people would be like, yeah, we know what Kalshi and Polymarket are doing. Maybe your average Joe in New York would be like, I don't know, man. I just need like free groceries, so I'm gonna go. What is this brand? Polymarket, sure. What the hell? And one day they find themselves sort of embattled in the betting ecosystem. We're like, oh wait, this is that brand we're talking about, you know? So I guess maybe they're trying to widen the audience they're trying to target, and very smartly so, if I might say.
Hmm.
Um, but I guess the lessons to be learned is physical activations, like you pointed out, with all the other brands as well. It may help bridge the gap between the abstract offering and the everyday understanding, and everyday sort of like struggles that people might go through. Um, and when multiple brands, especially two of the main dominant brands, sort of like compete in the same space, it makes the campaigns more exciting and the campaign can evolve into a dialogue rather than a standalone effort. So, if anything, maybe Kalshi and Polymarket are sort of benefiting from doing the same thing at the same time, the same city, as
Hmm.
opposed to being sort of stressed by like, oh, my competitors doing the same thing as well. Um, and look, New York City is the biggest marketing sort of location and environment that increases any brand's visibility and shareability of an activation. Very on brand with Mamdani's New York in terms of offering free groceries. I just don't see the connect of free groceries and a betting platform. I just don't. And I hope their marketing efforts kind of like pays off in one shape or another, but I didn't see the connect.
Yeah, definitely. Or the connection that I did see is maybe not the connection you want me to make. Awesome. Well, let's head into takeaways for each of them. For the drama, I think the biggest takeaway for me was creating an immersive environment for people, and really building out the world, having the wedding invitation, having the Boston Globe like wedding announcement, having the like our story and like our suggestions for like where to go in the city, is like A plus marketing if you're trying to get people immersed in what you're doing, because it gives them all these like fun details that like really builds out the world, and it also gives people an excuse to go searching for all the Easter eggs that like bring back the marketing to like the movie, instead of just like the stars who, might be getting all the attention otherwise. So, think about how your brands can build, worlds with your consumer to get them to know like, hey, yes, you're our target like audience and like you get it because like you went in search of like all these clues and you found them all.
Yeah. My main takeaway for Frida Baby involve people who you're targeting into the campaigning plan in the campaign planning and processing. I get the urge and the excitement of every brand wanting to jump into sort of the virality of humor or the virality of rage baiting or whatever, but sometimes your brand simply does not that fit that box. In no world do I see sexual innuendos going with baby products or anything related to babies. So I just don't think they should have like towed the line here.
Yeah, for me, this is one of those things where it's like you gotta be able to read the room, right? Like we talked about this last week with, the ring thing where it's like people are on high alert because of like anything having to do with surveillance and privacy. And this is like people are also on high alert with anything that has to do with pedophilia and like the Epstein files and just like child sexual abuse. Maybe it met the moment back when they first did it because, this isn't a new campaign, but you have to be reading the room of like where your brand stands at the moment because you don't want to get caught in the crossfire before you've had the chance to like actually respond to this. And then number two, don't be silent about something like this, because like people are looking to you for a response. And it's fine to say like, hey, this was a thing that was okay. Like even 5 years ago, people will say, no, it wasn't okay back then. But like, it was okay because look how popular your products are and look, people are still buying them. But the point is, you got to be ready for a change. And now is the time to do the rebrand. And you can be transparent about that and bring people along in the journey so that like they understand where you're coming from, as opposed to just obscuring what's happening and then making people feel like you actually don't care, or you're just going to keep plowing ahead and do what you're doing because you think that you're right, which I don't think they're right in this instance. Okay, for the Chase Whoop thing, the brand partnerships that you create with other brands reflect back on you. So if you know you're partnering with a brand that kind of seems like on the tail end of their popularity while you're trying to build up your popularity, you're glomming onto their popularity as well. So I think like brands really have to think about like, hey, is this really where our brand is at? Is this our target audience? Is this what our target audience actually wants? Or do we need to go a different route, right? Because this isn't even a partnership that people were expecting, right? So the fact that you're announcing it as a brand new thing makes people think that like, oh, like this is where you think you are at the moment. So are you reading that moment correctly, or are you kind of missing the mark?
Going off on that, yeah, I mean, look, if you're trying to create like an exclusive premium club, pick a brand that sort of like speaks to that. Uh, and I guess that would sort of elevate your campaign, make it more effective.
Agreed.
Okay, so the Kalshi Polymarket, the takeaway is they're trying to speak to people in the same language, in terms of where the people are from. So free groceries in New York City, where everything is really expensive, but at the same time, where Zoran Mamdani is talking about and is really after making New York City more affordable. I think it's a smart uh, campaign, and it's offline, which is very telling of the times that we are in, where every company is trying to pitch AI and AI driven. So I think this offline campaign, although it does not sort of resonate with what the larger betting platform does, is to me an interesting way of kind of like reaching new audiences. Although I still don't put the two together, free groceries and betting platforms.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. For me, this kind of read maybe not fully cynical, but definitely calculated. I was like trying to build up goodwill at a time when they're probably facing some regulation that might be coming their way. Another thing here is like, how are you reading the room of like what you're, what people are like talking about? But I guess we have yet to see, if it is going to be successful. Maybe it will, kind of increase their brand awareness, right? Because like you said, there are people that don't know these brands yet or haven't heard about them because they're not as terminally aligned as we are. So maybe for them, it did kind of like hit different because who doesn't want free groceries?
Mhm. Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me, Trishla. Where can people find you?
Yeah, no, firstly, thank you for having me. And you can find me on Twitter, X, um, at TRISHLAOSTWAL. That's my name. And you can also find me on Instagram with the same username.
Awesome. And then you can follow me at Sonia Bashez everywhere and the podcast at Meme Team Pod on YouTube and then Meme Team Podcast on Spotify and TikTok. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.